The so-called nobility. Free time for banquets, eating, sleeping, and building castles. As for the fighting spirit magic, that's just an embellishment. Keywords of the novel. The Great Noble with Fantasy Manifestation without pop-ups. Download the complete TXT collection of The Great Noble with Fantasy Manifestation, and read the latest chapters of The Great Noble with Fantasy Manifestation. Chapter 1. Brand of the Holland family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Brand of the Holland family. This is a very quiet modern city. Looking down from a high altitude, there are no traces of biological activity in the entire city. Except for the occasional swaying leaves and dust in the wind, the entire city is as quiet as a delicate city model. The only thing that stands out from this serene model is a swimsuit youth sitting behind a huge villa, beside a sparkling outdoor swimming pool, drinking cappuccino with a gloomy expression, and flipping through a book under a sun umbrella. The frown was furrowed, as if encountering some difficult problem related to life and death. Introduction to Magic. New edition of the Royal Mage Academy of the Kaya Empire in 427. This is the name of the book in the hands of the young man, and it is also the basic textbook for the first semester of his study at the law school. It provides a detailed description of the simple knowledge required to become a mage apprentice, as well as the simple methods to become a mage apprentice. Because of its excellent basic education, young people are familiar with every word in books. But when the words were connected into sentences and the sentences became paragraphs, his mysterious and profound eyes were filled with confusion and incomprehension. Magic, you are like a veiled girl hiding behind the hazy morning mist, making it difficult for me to see clearly and unable to ask for it. After elegantly complaining, the swimsuit youth frowned and continued to study hard. In fact, as a fundamental knowledge of magic, the book Introduction to Magic in the hands of young people is already quite simple. Although magic is indeed a profound subject, knowledge that only involves junior mage apprentices cannot be considered very profound. For an ordinary aristocrat with a good basic education, the difficulty level of this book is roughly equivalent to that of college freshmen facing higher mathematics on Earth. Take a look and ask more. You can always learn over time. As for why young people are so facing great enemies like this, I can only say, you scumbag, it's like this when exams are approaching. Because I didn't study hard on weekdays, the time for exams is tight now. A quick glance at the flowers naturally only allows for a vague overview. How can one become fat by taking one bite? At this point, time has already arrived at the end of the semester. There is still 1 week left until the final assessment of the first semester of the law school. I wasted a lot of free time because I was addicted to the golden finger. The aimless wanderer now has to face this big demon named final exam. About half a year ago, Mr. Wu Ming, who was extremely dissatisfied with the company by staying up late and working overtime, received the gaze of the wanderer god. As soon as his eyes closed and opened, he arrived at a strange fantasy world. Brand Holland, this is Mr. Wu Ming's new name, and his new identity is the second son of Viscount Holland in the southern provinces of the Kaya Empire in the Farnes continent. Through time travel, Mr. Wu Ming, who had fused his predecessor's memories, struggled to integrate into the luxurious life of the descendants of the imperial aristocracy. Living in castles, having meat to eat, and having many servants. When Mr. Wu Ming first came into contact with this kind of life, he was still quite uncomfortable. However, over time, he also accepted his current life and name. Although this technologically backward world lacks mobile phones and cannot surf the internet. But with all kinds of magical items and obedient maids, Mr. Brand felt that such a noble life did indeed have its beauty. If there is anything about this kind of life that he is always dissatisfied with, then he has to mention his incredibly disciplined and ambitious big brother. Jason Holland, the eldest son of Viscount Holland and the older brother of Brand, is 2 years older than Brand and has only celebrated his 18th birthday this year. As Brand's elder brother, although Yeltsin is not very old, he has now reached the level of a senior knight apprentice, ranking second to none among his peers. According to imperial law, hereditary noble titles are inherited by the eldest son. Therefore, if nothing unexpected happens, Yeltsin will inherit the territory and Viscount of the Holland family after his father's passing. Yeltsin is an idealistic person who has been striving to revitalize his family since childhood and constantly striving for it. As for where this goal came from, we have to mention their father, Viscount Holland. The Holland family used to have a glorious past, but now it has declined. When I was a child, Viscount Holland said this to his two sons. After hearing his father, who was omnipotent, speak such a desolate fact in a desolate tone, the young Yeltsin was deeply infected. From then on, welcoming back the glory of the Holland family became a lifelong goal pursued by Yeltsin. Don't be fooled by Mr. Holland's inspiring words, but in fact, the Holland family doesn't have a glorious past. The ancestors of the Holland family started as pioneers and obtained the title of Baron after expanding their territories. After generations of development, the Baron's estate has now evolved into the current Viscount's estate. So now it's actually the pinnacle of the Holland family. Lord Holland was just teaching his two sons about the fashion that day, just boasting casually. Who would have thought that Yeltsin would take it so seriously? But it's good to take it seriously. Lord Holland is happy to see his eldest son's progress succeed. Seeing the obvious effect of his teachings, Lord Holland couldn't help but say it a few more times in the future. Every time Yeltsin heard him talk about the past glory of his family, he looked excited. This greatly satisfied Lord Holland's vanity, as Brand often doubted his words when he was present. It's outrageous. How can you question the glorious history of the family? This is what Yeltsin said. Upon hearing Yeltsin's efforts to uphold the glory of the family, Lord Holland showed a rare blush of relief. This is also the origin of the conflict between Brand and Yeltsin. Yeltsin has been strict with himself since childhood, with the goal of revitalizing his family, and he can often be seen sweating profusely. Brand's lifestyle, on the other hand, is characterized by extravagance and fame. Animal milk must be fresh and added with an appropriate amount of refined sugar, white bread must be freshly baked and evenly spread with a layer of golden honey, clothes must be handmade, selecting the best fabric and using magic gold threads with shiny gold edges. Yeltsin has always been very dissatisfied with Brand, a useless younger brother who has always been greedy for pleasure, lacking ambition, and questioning the glory of his ancestors. It's okay not to strive for self-improvement and not work together with him to revitalize the family, but what's the reason for such extravagant waste of family property? This will seriously delay his future efforts to revitalize the family. Therefore, Brand, who indulged in the extravagant years and constantly searched for luxury art, would occasionally be caught by Yeltsin, who had a stinky face, to preach. This makes Brand quite annoyed. Brand actually had a period of progress. But the final result proved that apart from being too handsome, Brand was definitely a useless person. I am almost 16 years old now, and the knight's cultivation method is just beginning. Although I have the talent to become a mage, I am a scumbag who hates learning, even if the protagonist has traveled through it. In the end, Brand decided to mess it up. Only a luxurious life can give his injured soul some comfort. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Simulated World and Utopian Realism. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Simulated World and Utopian Realism. Brand's poor performance prompted the already dissatisfied Yeltsin to suggest to Lord Holland to limit Brand's food and clothing consumption. What moved Brand more was that Yeltsin's proposal was rejected by Lord Holland without hesitation. In the eyes of Lord Holland, if nobles are not extravagant, they are still called nobles. Can someone with a big family and a lot of business still not afford Brand's expenses? This is completely questioning my ability to accumulate wealth, Lord Holland. However, under Yeltsin's tireless persuasion, Lord Holland gradually wavered. One time, Yeltsin mentioned that Brand had hit his head on a pillar and fell into a coma while playing with a maid in the past. Viscount Holland finally felt that Yeltsin's words did have some truth. Apart from his basic qualities as a descendant of nobility, Brand is indeed a bit too ignorant and inexperienced. Playing with a maid can still make one's head bleed. This is too weak, isn't it? It's not about Brand wasting his family property. Viscount Holland doesn't care about Brand's expenses. He is just a little worried about the future of his second son. You should know that Brand cannot inherit his title and territory. He will become independent in the future. Despite being caressed by him, the days ahead will not be easy as he is so ignorant and inexperienced. So, after careful consideration, Viscount Holland planned two paths for Brand. One is to marry the legitimate daughter of Count Romain in order to bring the Holland and Romain families closer together. The second is to enter the Imperial Mage Academy, study diligently inside, and then become a formal mage through hard work. Although mages are a noble and rare group, Brand also possesses the innate qualities to become a mage. But considering Brand's usually lazy personality, Viscount Holland actually prefers the first choice. As the legitimate daughter of Count Romain, if Brand could marry her, and without any unexpected circumstances, she would be able to live a comfortable life no matter how extravagant she may be. Under the joint efforts of the two families, it was also easy to give Brand the title of Baron of a fiefdom, at most in a more remote territory. Although the ranking of the Romain family is relatively low among the various Earl families, in fact, Brand, the second son of the Viscount, is not worthy of being the eldest daughter of the Earl family. However, who would say that Brand is handsome? Viscount Holland has heard more than once at aristocratic banquets that Viscount X and Count X have subtly revealed to him their daughter's optimism towards Brand. Perhaps at first, I was a bit confused. My second son, who was ignorant and inexperienced, didn't have any shining points that could be appreciated by others. But after listening too much, Viscount Holland gradually remembered. It was those girls who were attracted to Brand's handsome appearance. Viscount Holland is very satisfied with Brand's handsome appearance, as it is inherited from his excellent bloodline. Viscount Holland showed a great interest in the overt and covert hints of these aristocratic friends. Marriage between nobles is a common occurrence, usually led by the parents of both parties, which involves various interests and alliances, and the wishes of the parties involved account for a very low proportion. After some screening, Count Romain, who had many business collaborations, entered his eyes. Because there are many business dealings, there are many benefits to the Holland family being able to form an alliance with them. Coincidentally, their daughter also fell in love with Brand. It seems that their eldest son has been pursuing their legitimate daughter. After hesitating for a second, Viscount Holland still made up his mind. In the face of the development of the family, these small matters of children's private affairs are not important. I believe Yeltsin, who aims to revitalize his family, will understand. In short, as long as Brand agrees, this matter is almost done. However, what made Holland very regretful was that Brand ultimately chose to study hard at the School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and became a wizard. Viscount Holland ultimately expressed strong support for Brand's choice. Although I doubt whether my lazy second son can become a wizard through his own efforts. However, it was ultimately Brand's own choice, and for his youngest son's few ambitious actions, his heart was filled with satisfaction and anticipation. Of course, there is absolutely no reason why Brand is still young in this cough. Perhaps it cannot be said that there is none. After all, marriage alliances usually require the parties to reach the age of 18. In Lord Holland's view, with the strict assessment system of the Imperial Mage Academy, if Brand were to slack off inside, he would probably be expelled from the academy soon. When I come back, the age for the marriage alliance will be just right. And if Brand really becomes a formal mage, it would be great. The partners of the alliance can be replaced with a batch of higher quality ones. In short, Brand entered the Imperial Mage Academy and unlocked the standard gold finger of the Pathfinder. A simulated world. During a meditation class. The so-called simulated world, at the beginning, was a boundless world with nothing. Brand has the highest control over this world and can enter it at any time through meditation, achieving a quantum superposition state, where his body exists in both the simulated world and the real world. In the simulation world, Brand has the authority of a creator and can use his existing knowledge to consume less spiritual energy and create things out of thin air. After spending a full 20 days creating a massive star that constantly undergoes nuclear fusion reactions, Brand became obsessed with that great achievement of creation. He is creating the world. As an ordinary aristocratic descendant, Brand felt immensely excited and proud at that moment. He is so great. After a period of effort, the simulation world has 8 planetary systems similar to the solar system, one of which was named Aqua Blue by Brand. Afterwards, after a long and uninterrupted effort, 2/3 of the surface of the planet Aquarius has become a deep blue ocean, and the other 1/3 is lush land. On land, apart from natural land, the most prominent is a modern city like sea, where Brand lived in the past. This is Brand's masterpiece. If it weren't for learning meditation, Brand's memory would have been greatly enhanced. He is afraid that it will be difficult to create this city. If there is any fundamental difference between the simulated world and the pre-time Earth, it is the absence of animals. After experiments, it was found that simulating the world cannot create any self-awareness of living beings, and Brand cannot bring self-awareness into it. So the only living thing in the simulation world is plants. Brand has been worried more than once about whether there might be any bad problems in this world with incomplete biosphere, but over time, he has also opened up. Anyway, at most it's just a matter of overturning and starting over. And if we talk about what benefits the golden finger of the simulation world can bring to Brand, the cappuccino in Brand's hand is one of the benefits. With Brand's current good mental state, as long as he expends all his maximum mental energy, he can bring this liquid cappuccino, about 300 milliliters, to the outside world and beside himself. From a real-world perspective, this is a fantasy manifestation that can be called a miracle. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. The Unmagical Gold Finger. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The unmagical gold finger. In the simulation world, Brand can create whatever comes to his mind. Meanwhile, Brand can bring items from the simulated world to the real world by consuming mental energy. The combination of the two, as long as Brand has enough spiritual power, he can have any item even in the real world. This is also the reason why Brand spent a whole semester of his free time simulating the world, rather than studying the knowledge of mages. As a superpower who can create the world. Are you telling me about the courses and final exams at the law school now? He still needs to participate in the final assessment. As a handsome aristocratic descendant, although Brand has various shortcomings and bad habits, he is not lacking in self-awareness. With his current level of mental strength, creating a cup of coffee in the real world is very difficult. The so-called creation of the world is just self-entertainment when there is no one around. He needs to become a stronger mage to have higher spiritual limits and longer mana bars, in order to fully unleash his ability to manifest his fantasies. Because of this, although Brand has never been able to understand what the teacher is saying in class, he has never missed a single class this semester. After all, skipping classes without reason will result in a demerit and dropping out of school if you come a few more times. Previously, Brand was not actually worried about the final assessment. Because the Imperial College of Mages has regulations that anyone who becomes a junior apprentice can be exempted from the final assessment of the first semester. Brand had always believed that he possessed the almost invincible ability of utopian beings. Isn't it simple to qualify for exemption from the final assessment of the first semester of the law school? The development of the matter is also similar to what he thought. Because when entering the simulation world, the real-world body is also in a meditative state. In the first few months of school, apart from attending classes and eating, Brand spent almost all of his free time in the simulation world. Therefore, under continuous meditation, Brand's spiritual power has now reached the standard of a junior mage apprentice. The basic conditions for becoming a junior mage apprentice are only two simple ones, one is spiritual power and the other is magic. So, Brand, whose spiritual power has reached the standard, as long as he creates enough magic cores for him to quickly absorb the magic. Just 3 days. No. Just 2 days. Mr. Brand can use his spiritual power and magic to open up spiritual space, and then become a junior mage apprentice, thus obtaining exemption from the final exam. Brand originally planned this way. However, just now when he wanted to create the magic core, he suddenly discovered the hidden rules of this simulated world. This is a world without any extraordinary things, such as spiritual energy, magic, extraordinary substances, etc., none of which work here. After repeated attempts, Brand sadly discovered. Whether it is as the foundation of a transcendent world. Magic plants, still the basic trading currency of the Farnes continent. Deep silver and magic gold, or expensive rare items such as magic cores and magic crystals. There is no way to create a simulated world. At least so far, he can only create things he has seen on Earth, and he also needs to know the approximate composition. Knowing that the simulation world has such limitations is not magical at all. Brand quickly turned his gaze to the highly sought-after diamonds and various gemstones on Earth. However, after some investigation, Brand found that they didn't seem to have much market in the continent of Farnes. For beautiful and compact decorations, people in the continent of Farnes are more concerned about their magical adaptability, magic guiding ability, magic storage ability, and so on. It is best for the finished product to be able to store 1 to 2 practical spells. If it can't be associated with magic and is just beautiful and attractive, then it's relatively cheap. Its value ranges from several to dozens of deep silver coins. In summary, after some research, Brand found that his golden fingers did not seem to provide much help in becoming a junior wizard apprentice. Relying on unlimited resources, the exemption plan to quickly upgrade to a junior mage apprentice has failed before it even started. The worst-case scenario is that Brand just realized this. There is only 1 week left until the final assessment of the first semester. The handsome Mr. Brand didn't want to go back to his hometown so early and be buried in the tomb of marriage. So, feeling the urgency of time, Brand had to rummage through the magic textbooks of this semester, trying to complete the entire semester's knowledge in a few days. This is also the origin of the initial scene in the story. Brand looked distressed as he flipped through the basic textbooks of the first semester of the law school by the pool. In addition to the thick dictionary in Brand's hand, there are also dozens of exam reference books of similar thickness stacked on the nearby table. Despite learning meditation, Brand now has a super strong memory. But after an hour of study, Brand sadly realized that it was absolutely impossible to jot down all the contents of these books without spending a month or so. It's needless to mention that as a scumbag, Brand now only wants to pursue passing. For a long time realizing this fact, Brand eventually put down the book in his hand. This won't work. Brand began to contemplate whether there were any other shortcuts that could solve his current problem. In a past life, an ancient saying goes, "Poverty leads to change." Versatile. Although a seemingly glamorous piece of junk has brought shame to the army of travelers, optimistic Brand believes that he will definitely come up with a solution if he tries harder. Brand began to carefully recall the content of the exam. The final exam of the first semester is divided into 2 parts. A compulsory subject exam and multiple elective subject exams. The content of the compulsory subject exam is the introductory knowledge of mages. The content of this exam is included in the more than 10 exam reference books in front of Brand. It is unlikely that there is enough time to enter the simulated world through meditation and open a book. Because entering a meditative state also takes time. It takes about 10 minutes at the fastest in an absolutely quiet environment. Additionally, although the exam content is relatively narrow, such a thick book is not easy to read. Elective subjects on this side. Its examination scope is not limited to just a dozen or so books, and the elective subjects include multiple secondary subjects such as alchemy and pharmacy, rune and matrix studies, and study of spells and spells. Candidates from the law school can choose one or more elective subjects to take the final exam. As long as the required subjects and any elective courses meet the passing standards, the final exam is considered passed. It should be noted that although the first semester elective subject exam only assesses the most basic aspects, it also involves practical operations. This is a bit confusing for Brand. It's not something that can be achieved with just theoretical knowledge. At present, the probability of Brand passing the exam is almost zero. So is it still the only way to become a junior mage apprentice? Brand began to think about ways to quickly become a junior mage apprentice without relying on golden fingers. What is currently hindering me from becoming a junior mage apprentice is having enough magic cores, but I don't have enough magic coins to purchase enough magic cores at the moment. After thinking for a while, Brand turned his gaze to cappuccino on the table to his left. His eyes gradually brightened up. He came up with a solution. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Business. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Business. Mr. Brand, did you hear from the servant that you have discovered a new plant? Its seeds help to refresh your mind. In a certain alchemy laboratory at the Faculty of Mages in the Kea Empire, an old wizard with pale hair, thick dark circles under his eyes, and wrinkled robes asked Brand curiously. This old wizard is called Morian Hanfa. He is a professor of alchemy at the Kea Imperial Mages College and also a lecturer in alchemy for the new generation of Brand. For the student Brand, the old wizard left a deep impression. In terms of appearance, Brand is at the forefront of the law school. Almost every time a mentor gathers, Professor Morian can hear those superficial, female mentors gather together, excitedly discussing Brand's every move during class. Cough. Of course, this is not important. As a respected alchemist, he has a fundamental difference from those superficial female mages. With the spiritual expertise of Master Morian, he can easily observe the spiritual level of ordinary people below junior-level mages and their apprentices. So there is no secret in Professor Morian's eyes about Brand's spiritual level, from the level of an ordinary person when he entered school to now reaching the standard of a junior mage apprentice. He has seen it all. The speed of spiritual improvement is the fastest among the students of this class. If evaluated in a simple and understandable way, Brand is the top student of this class. This is the reason why Professor Morian left a deep impression on Brand, not because of Brand's jealous, useless body. In summary, for an excellent and unique student like Brand, the old professor's patience is slightly more than others. On Brand's end, upon hearing the old professor's inquiry, he took out a few brown beans from his backpack and placed them on the table between the two. Then, he introduced to the old wizard, "That's right, Professor Morian. This is the seed of that plant, which I call coffee beans. Just grind it into powder, mix it with hot water, and filter out the residue. This way, you can make that super potion that can refresh your mind after a cup. I call that potion coffee." Professor Morian, who has always been rigorous, ignored Brand's exaggerated boasting. Nobles, he has seen it many times. They always like to use exaggerated language to show that what they say is right. But magic is rigorous, and any conclusions without empirical evidence are of no value. After Brand took out the coffee beans, the old professor took out a magnifying glass-like detection tool from his magic pocket and carefully studied it. Not long after, he came to the conclusion. Although it is indeed an unrecorded seed of a new plant, it seems to be just an ordinary plant without any magical reactions or extraordinary characteristics. Seeing Professor Morian's skeptical expression, Brand was not in a hurry either. This coffee bean emerged from his simulation world, and of course, things in the physical world have no extraordinary characteristics. But who said there must be extraordinary characteristics to wake up and wake up? I saw Brand's lips slightly curl up and confidently propose. Although it is not a magic plant, it does have a refreshing effect. How about I make you a cup of coffee and let you experience it directly? If someone said that, Professor Morian would definitely refuse without any accidents. It's just a new species, and many are discovered every year. It's not worth spending too much time as an alchemist until its specific value is determined. But considering that the person proposing this suggestion is a genius student in their class, a favorite of a group of superficial female mages, and it is said that this person's father is also a viscount of an imperial territory. Taking all factors into consideration, Professor Morian smiled and nodded. Magic, not only knowledge, but also interpersonal communication is important. Without the magic coins contributed by the imperial aristocracy, the research funds of these professors would not be as abundant as they are now. And now, if we have more contact with Brand, won't we have a lot more discussion for the next gathering? I don't know how many superficial female sorcerers would be attracted to Brand's alchemy deeds. Cough. The last one is not important. Then, Professor Morian saw Brand take out a complete set of tools from his backpack, grind the coffee beans into powder in a few strokes, and then ask the servant for hot water to mix them. Finally, after being filtered through a filter cloth, 2 cups of dark brown medicine were made by Brand. Although some are dissatisfied with Brand's rough alchemy technique. But because he was close, Professor Morian had already smelled the strong, medicinal aroma emanating. After taking a deep breath, he felt that the fatigue caused by his long-term research seemed to have weakened a bit. After Brand's potion preparation was over, Professor Morian couldn't wait to pick up the cup of coffee potion placed in front of him and take a sip before Brand seemed to want to say something. After taking this bite, besides being a bit hot, a bitter taste bloomed in the taste buds on the tip of the tongue. That feeling is somewhat indescribable. Although the taste is bitter, it is keenly perceived. He found that this bitterness contained a subtle sense of coolness. And it was precisely this sense of coolness that inexplicably uplifted his spirit. Although the process of this change is so subtle that even ordinary people cannot detect it. But as a master of alchemy, he instantly realized what this meant. Unbelievable. This thing contains a natural refreshing substance. This substance has not been discovered before. It may replace one of the main ingredients in the awakening potion. Looking at the unfinished coffee in his hand, Professor Morian's eyes gradually became hot. Along the way, he also developed a good impression of Brand, who brought this cup of coffee. Mr. Brand, I believe you still have this plant seed named coffee beans at your place. I am willing to purchase it at a high price. Seeing Professor Morian recognize the value of coffee beans, Brand's heart relaxed a lot. Don't look at Brand's confident expression before, it's actually just a facade. Performance is a compulsory course for the nobility. After all, when it comes to whether he can pass the final exam, Brand has always been uneasy in his heart. Brand smiled slightly and did not make any statement regarding Professor Morian's proposal to purchase coffee beans. Since the value of refreshing coffee beans has been recognized, the next step is negotiation time. High price acquisition. Brand wouldn't be so foolish. As Professor Morian finally pointed out, coffee beans may be a substitute for a main ingredient in awakening potions. Awakening potion, it is a type of potion that can quickly restore mental power. Brand occasionally drinks 1 or 2 bottles to replenish his mental energy while creating a simulated world. Due to its expensive price, Brand specifically went to the alchemy department of the college to inquire about its production formula and refining techniques. The high cost of awakening potions comes from the use of a magical plant that has a refreshing and brain-warming effect. At present, no second plant with the same effect has been found on the continent of Farnes. Due to limited planting conditions, the price of this magical plant is very expensive. Considering the success rate of pharmaceutical refining and other issues, the market price of a bottle of awakening potion has reached 30 magic coins. You should know that Brand, who has always been extravagant, only spends 50 magic coins per month. Under the influence of magic, the Kaya Empire, which is not lacking in basic food, only 1 silver coin is enough for an ordinary civilian family to live for a month. Although it is unclear how plants with only a refreshing effect can be used as the main material for restoring mental power, this is not something Brand needs to consider. Anyway, that's what they all say. Brand just needs to think that way. In summary, if coffee beans could replace the main ingredient of the awakening potion, the benefits involved would be enormous and terrifying. The Holland family may take a big step towards the path of great nobility as a result. Yeltsin may be overjoyed. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Professor Lying Flat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Professor Lying Flat. Although coffee beans have broad prospects for use, but improving the formulation of drugs is not an easy task. Although coffee beans and expensive magic plants like refined awakening potions also have a refreshing and brain-warming effect. But after all, it is not a magic plant, and its refining method must be quite different from the awakening potion mainly made of magic plants. Pharmaceutical preparation is a very rigorous discipline, and the formulation of pharmaceuticals cannot be changed simply by modification. That requires meticulous research by alchemists. But after all, these have nothing to do with Brand. This is a question that alchemists need to consider. Brand only needs to determine the potential value of coffee beans in the future. As a descendant of nobility, striving for more benefits for oneself is an instinct ingrained in one's bloodline. Facing Professor Morian's slightly fiery gaze, Brand's face showed a faint smile. I only heard him say, "Professor Morian, I believe you have already seen its value. If it weren't for my recent financial constraints and the need for funds to purchase the magic core, I would definitely not have taken it out. It is enough to become one of the pillar industries of the Holland family's future." Seeing Brand's ignoring his proposed acquisition, Professor Morian felt a bit uneasy. He admitted that the previous proposal to acquire coffee beans was indeed somewhat fanciful. But if it weren't for the recent tight budget, Professor Morrison, as a simple researcher, didn't know how to take on the statement that Brand would definitely pass down coffee beans as a family heirloom from generation to generation in the future. The interline between the words Brand actually highlights one quality of coffee beans. Expensive. You should know that in the continent of Farns, nobles have always been discreetly referred to as unscrupulous slave owners and cunning big merchants. Despite having been in the ranks of the nobility for a long time, Professor Morian still maintains his pure heart as a scholar and researcher. To put it simply, business negotiations with nobles always take advantage of them. Who knows why these children, both raised by their parents, are so cunning and cunning? Despite being resistant to commercial negotiations with the noble son of Brand, he confirmed through his recent personal experience that the plant seeds named coffee beans by Brand do have enormous research value. You should know that creating growth conditions for ordinary plants is much easier than creating growth conditions for magical plants. So if we really find a way to replace the expensive magic plant's awakening potion with coffee beans, then its cost will visibly decrease. The value in this is unimaginable. Imagine endless research materials in the future. Professor Morian's heart is very excited at this moment. Professor Morian is not prepared to let such a big pie slip out of his hand as it falls from the sky. However, he is not prepared to give up the expected benefits for nothing. Professor Morian began to think about how to strive for greater benefits for himself. Soon, he found a breakthrough. As Brand said, coffee beans have enormous potential value, and if it weren't for the urgent need for money, normal people would definitely not have taken them out. And Brand just said he lacks money to buy magic core. Think of the upcoming final assessment. Professor Morian believes that there should be some close connection between them, but the lack of an important puzzle makes it difficult for him to see the hidden truth. This cannot be a genius Brand who lacks confidence in passing the final exam. Now he wants to quickly absorb magic cores and reach the level of a junior mage apprentice, and then obtain exemption for the first semester. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Due to rapid thinking, the brain expended a large amount of energy in a short period of time. From Brand's perspective, a thin layer of sweat oozed from Professor Morian's forehead. Seeing this situation, Mr. Brand, who was gentle and considerate, pulled a tissue and handed it over, caring and saying, "Professor Morian. You seem a bit nervous." "No, no, no. I'm not nervous." Watching Professor Morian's old face suddenly turn red, Brand began to speculate whether Professor Morian had any illness. Morian also noticed his unconscious loss of composure and began to shift the topic. "Does Mr. Brand have confidence in next week's final exam?" Although Professor Morian's sudden mention of the final exam made Brand feel uneasy, the aristocratic's consistent talent for acting still made him show a confident look. "That's for sure. After working hard this semester, I am still quite confident in the exam at the end of the semester." Brand's confidence allowed Professor Morian to rule out the possibility of an extremely low probability that he had just thought of. Just thinking about it, the basic method to enhance mental power is meditation, and meditation is a very tedious thing. It is not difficult for Brand to learn some basic knowledge if he can do such a boring thing so well. Besides, coffee beans, which have huge benefits, cannot be related to trivial matters like the final exams of the Mage Academy. So perhaps Brand wants to take this opportunity to absorb Magic Core and become a junior mage apprentice, in order to determine his genius status in the Mage Academy. It's been a long time since there are such talented students at the Imperial Mage Academy. As the second sons of the Viscount who cannot inherit the title, they have to bear more pressure, which is not only from their identity, but also from their brothers and sisters. Starting to accumulate personal fame and capital before reaching adulthood to break away from the family, Brand is already a model of early maturity among the nobility. I believe there must be a strange gaze from the legal heir at home. No wonder Brand took out precious items like coffee beans. Anyway, investing when a genius is still weak is already a steady and profitable business. Under the secret care of his Viscount's father, Brand's journey of leaving home for growth should also be smooth sailing. Left and right are just a small profit. Anyway, negotiations are probably not negotiable. After a moment of contemplation, Professor Morian lay flat. However, for the safety of our partners, he still suggests. "Mr. Brand, I understand your idea of quickly becoming a junior mage apprentice by absorbing magic cores." When he heard the words, "I understand why you want to quickly become a junior mage apprentice," Brand's heart slowed down, but with his strong willpower, he still didn't show it. Discover it, then discover it. I don't think there are too many teams of scumbags. When Brand was ready to speak candidly, Professor Morian's words prompted him to retract all the prepared speeches. Professor Morian continued with some implication. "Although honor can be helpful for your awkward situation at home, you should know that being too famous is not necessarily a good thing. Proper concealment can lead to a more stable development." Professor Morian's words left Brand feeling a bit confused. Embarrassing situation. I don't seem embarrassed. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Meditation Potions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Meditation Potions. Although I didn't understand what strange things Professor Morian had in mind, they were always well-intentioned, and Brand sincerely thanked him. Seeing Brand's thoughtful expression, Professor Morian nodded with relief. Then, he turned the topic back to coffee beans. "For coffee beans, I have a proposal here. Due to their potential broad usage prospects, we will jointly invest resources in their development. What do you think? Your proposal is very relevant." Brand thinks so. Coffee beans are a product of imagination. Since coffee beans have value, and only he can create this thing. So if we don't monopolize it, Brand's years of noble education classes will be in vain. Collaboration with Professor Morian is also a last resort. The Holland family did not have any familiar alchemists. Next, the two had a friendly and harmonious interest negotiation. In the early research stage, Brand provided coffee beans for basic research by Professor Morian. For each batch of coffee beans provided by Brand, Professor Morian was required to pay Brand magic coins and maintain the confidentiality of the research. The final academic research results are named by Professor Morian alone, and Brand has full access to the results. The development of benefits in the middle and later stages is jointly funded by Professor Brand and Professor Morrison, with benefits divided into 3 to 7 parts. Morrison occupies 3 floors and Brand occupies 7 floors, but Brand needs to bear the cost of promotion. The negotiation process was very easy for Brand, and Professor Morian gave up the benefits he could have easily obtained, which left Brand slightly puzzled. However, looking at the 500 magic coins he had, Brand quickly put his doubts behind him. This is the initial purchase capital for Professor Morian to purchase coffee beans. Next, as long as Professor Morian is provided with a batch of coffee beans at regular intervals, the transaction can proceed smoothly. With magic coins, there is magic core. At market price, the magic core purchased with 500 magic coins is enough for Brand to reach the level of a junior mage apprentice. At this point, all obstacles to becoming a junior mage apprentice have been cleared. The final assessment can no longer be a hindrance to Brand. Brand's heart relaxed. Because the magic contract has been signed and both parties have achieved their goals, their conversation has become much easier. Morian smiled and asked Brand if he had any learning problems recently. He could give Brand a free small stove. Although attending classes, Brand's understanding of alchemy and pharmacy, who always listens to heavenly books, stopped at the profound name of alchemy in pharmacy. However, in order to maintain the confidence and demeanor of the aristocracy, Brand still smiled and said, "Magic is indeed a profound subject, and I inevitably encountered some doubts during the process of learning magic. However, with my own thinking and friends' help, most of them were finally answered." To avoid Professor Morian's further inquiry about alchemy, Brand took the initiative to shift the topic to something he was more familiar with. "I have been having some doubts about meditation lately because there are a lot of things to learn and meditation takes up a lot of my time. So, I have been thinking about whether there is any way to do both at the same time." "Yes, there is." Professor Morian answered Brand's question without hesitation. Meditation potions can achieve this. They have extremely strong auxiliary meditation effects and can help you enter a state of dual use. After drinking meditation potions, you can meditate and learn at the same time. I remember I told you about it in the mid-term class, right? Watching Professor Morian hand over the dark blue potion to him, Brand was momentarily stunned. On Professor Morian's side, he saw Brand's stunned expression when he realized he hadn't listened well in class, and he smiled with understanding. After all, human energy is limited. Even geniuses have their weaknesses. For example, alchemy. The inner sense of superiority allowed Professor Morian, as an alchemist, to generously forgive Brand. After bidding farewell to Professor Morian, Brand returned to his dormitory. After entering the dormitory, Brand eagerly drank the dark blue alchemy potion. He wants to validate an idea. If meditation and learning can be carried out simultaneously, can one focus on both and immerse some consciousness into the simulated world while the body is awake in the real world? After some experimentation, the answer is feasible. At this moment, Brand has 2 perspectives. One is from the perspective of the dormitory. Another perspective is by the carefully constructed outdoor swimming pool in the simulated world, where he is flipping through thick exam reference books. Magical alchemy. Brand was in a happy mood at this moment, and he immediately thought of how to use it in exams. Although it's a bit expensive, the duration of the meditation potion is about 5 hours, which is enough for me to complete the exam questions, so I have passed the final exam steadily. The market price of meditation potions is 20 magic coins, and Brand, who has just received a huge sum of money, doesn't really care about these 20 magic coins. And the bottle he just drank was given to him by Professor Morian, and he didn't pay for it originally. Of course, this is not the point. The key is that through meditation potions, Brand can completely turn the original closed book exam into an open book exam, neglecting the time it takes to enter a meditative state. Even with a plethora of reference page codes, Brand still has a great chance of passing the assessment. In this way, there's no need to rush to become a junior mage apprentice. As Professor Morian said, being too famous is not a good thing. Brand is going to spend some time reviewing the content of the elective exam. If there were a shortcut to take, Brand wouldn't have to spend a lot of money to become the leading bird. Time quickly arrived one day later. Because the courses for this semester have already ended, we are waiting for the exam next week, so there is no need to go to the classroom every morning for classes now. On this day, Brand rarely got up early to have breakfast in the cafeteria, and then walked non-stop towards the direction of the library. Due to the final exam next week, the library is surprisingly overcrowded. Looking inside through the glass window, every table was piled up with books and filled with people. Although the Master's College is all personal dormitories with a large quiet environment inside, these students insist on coming to the library, claiming that the learning atmosphere is excellent. Brand couldn't quite understand the confusing behavior of these classmates, and what annoyed him was that even though he had arrived early, he still had to queue up to enter the library to verify his identity. Unlike those classmates who have gone into self-study, Brand is preparing to review the content of past elective subject exams. Although the practical content of elective exams comes from textbooks, who knows which specific type of assessment is being conducted? Looking at those heavy books, Brand didn't want to waste time slowly flipping through them. He just wants to hold a few thin exam papers now, see what he has taken in previous years, and see if there are any elective exams that can be taken quickly. It is best that some elective subject exams can rely on their own simulation world and take the open book shortcut, like theoretical exams. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Elective Course Exam Questions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Elective Course Exam Questions. Excuse me, is this Holland Jr.? Just as Brand was anxiously waiting for the long queue to slowly advance, a young and pleasant voice came from behind him. Brand turned around and saw a girl standing behind him. A slightly mature face, chestnut long hair at the waist, and a silver wizard robe. From her appearance alone, she should be a few years older than Brand, although she knows Brand doesn't know her. Of course, it's not very important whether you recognize or not. Because the long queue was moving slowly and there was nothing to do, Brand started chatting with this senior. Brand smiled and said, "Hello, I'm glad to meet such a beautiful lady in the boring queue. I'm Brand Holland. How should I address you?" Seeing Brand's gentle and friendly smile, the girl blushed shyly and responded with a smile. "I'm Jenny Cross, I'm 1 year older than you now." After hearing that it was the Cross family, Brand had a simple guess about the identity of the senior student in front of him. Within the Kea Empire, Brand remembered any slightly famous noble family name very clearly. That is one of the few, strict, requirements from Lord Holland. Brand and his elder brother Yeltsin have been memorizing it since childhood. And among them, the Cross family Brand is even more familiar, because there is only one piece of territory between the Viscount Holland and the Viscount Cross. Although his memory has become somewhat blurred, Brand is more certain that he even played in the territory of the Cross family when he was a child. If Brand remembers correctly, the main industry of the Cross family is animal husbandry. There is a large grassland there, and most of the animal milk Brand drinks every morning is purchased from the Cross family. Although there are many thoughts in my heart, the real time has only passed in a blink of an eye. After learning that this senior sister came from the Cross family, Brand curiously asked, "May I ask what is the relationship between your senior sister and Viscount Edelman Cross?" Jenny replied, "That's my father." Upon hearing Jenny Cross say she was Edelman Cross's daughter, Brand was surprised. He said, "Although I haven't seen Viscount Cross for a while, I still remember last year when he was hunting, he rode his warhorse with a majestic demeanor, but it seemed like I hadn't seen my senior at that time. At that time, I was still in college, and it's a pity that I didn't see my younger brother Brand. Jenny Cross's face turned even redder when she heard Brand start boasting about Jenny's father's heroic figure. If Brand had a system, he could probably hear the prompt sound of this senior's popularity rapidly increasing. I don't think my junior brother came to the library today for self-study. Is there any material he needs to borrow? Let's talk about it, maybe I can be helpful, senior sister. Because Brand is empty-handed and doesn't hold 2 textbooks like she does, it's easy to associate him with not coming for self-study. Jenny has some doubts about this. Brand also had no intention of concealing it and informed him of his intention to borrow the real test paper for the elective course. Upon hearing this, Jenny Cross nodded knowingly. She has also been searching for past final exam questions in the library like Brand did. However, her specificity is relatively strong, unlike Brand who is prepared to browse through all the exam questions for elective courses. She said, I used to focus on Warcraft domestication. If you want to take this exam, I can give you some tutoring. Jenny Cross quickly recalled taking the Warcraft domestication exam at the end of the first semester. And he explained his own experience on the exam content. After learning that the content of the Warcraft domestication exam was about trying to tame low-level Warcraft, Brand frowned and directly ruled out the elective course of Warcraft domestication in his heart. There's no way to take a shortcut. Just as Brand frowned a bit, a senior sister in front of him unintentionally looked back. When she saw the frown on Brand's face, she felt anxious and unconsciously wanted to solve any problems for this handsome junior. Are you discussing the final elective assessment for the first semester? I majored in alchemy and pharmacy back then. This senior sister is very familiar with the alchemy and potion elective course exams she has participated in the past and explained her own experiences. After a harmonious and pleasant conversation, I learned that the exam content of the alchemy and potion course is about practical skills in preparing potions. In his heart, Brand also excluded the exam for the elective course of alchemy in pharmacy. In happy times, time always passes quickly. Due to the queue, Brand regretfully ended the conversation. He left the contact addresses of 2 senior students and stated that he would definitely visit and exchange ideas when he has time. Entering the library, as there were quite a few people inside, Brand was not prepared to waste his time and walked directly to the area where historical questions were stored. After spending 2 magic coins and replicating a test question in the replication area, Brand hurriedly left the crowded library. Returning to the dormitory, Brand sorted the exam questions by subject and carefully read them one by one. Pharmaceutical refining techniques. This has been ruled out. How to pick magic potions. Exclude. Draw rune. No, not really. Release the magic arrow. This can be learned, but what if the magic arrow is not tested during the exam? So it's still ruled out. After some screening, Brand regretfully found that all these questions had been excluded. However, it's normal to think about it. The simulation world has limited help for Brand, and currently it can be considered a large database. However, the elective deputy position exam requires practical operation. At least so far, Brand has not found any way to take the open book shortcut of elective exams. It seems like there is no hope for exams like compulsory courses, so let's see if there are any subjects that can be completed quickly. Although there are only 6 short days left. But Brand is still prepared to try and see if he can quickly learn an elective subject, if not, and then take the last resort of rapid promotion. After a more detailed screening of exam questions in numerous elective courses, rune grammar theory began to enter his scope of consideration. For no other reason, the scope of the exam for this elective course is very narrow. After summarizing and analyzing the exam questions from previous years, Brand was surprised to find that the scope of the first semester's rune matrix study exam was repeatedly jumping horizontally in the 3 types of questions. Drawing runes 1 to 3. It is highly likely that this year's exam questions on rune formation will also involve drawing one of these three types of runes. Compared to the broad and extensive scope of other elective exams, the study of runic arrays with only three types of questions is undoubtedly very prominent among them. Brand thinks his chances are great. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Stuff of Effort. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Stuff of Effort. After making up his mind, Brand opened the Book of Runes and prepared to delve deeper into the process of drawing runes. After flipping to the page on how to draw rune 1, the brief explanation above left Brand somewhat puzzled. This doubt is slightly different from the previous confusion that I couldn't understand. What puzzled Brand was that the method of drawing runes recorded in the book seemed somewhat simple. The drawing method for the first three runes is very simple. Just use a rune pen filled with rune ink and draw it on the rune paper according to the rune's appearance. Of course, the error must be kept within a certain range. So drawing runes is drawing. Draw like a little and you'll be able to draw successfully. After flipping through the rune drawing instructions several times, Brand came to this conclusion. This conclusion is too simple for him to believe. It's just drawing. Although the strokes of the rune are a bit complicated, it's not done well at once. If you draw a few more times, it's not enough. I'm afraid this book is not a pirate, is it? Such thoughts flashed through Brand's heart. Closing the book in his hand, Brand's gaze swept towards the corner of the book cover. There is a magical seal from the Kaya Imperial Mage Academy there. This indicates that this book is a genuine edition, and the content inside is also guaranteed by the Imperial Mage Academy. After confirming that this book was a rune book published by the Kaya Imperial Mage Academy, rather than a pirated book by some unscrupulous organization, Brand's doubts deepened in his eyes. Is drawing runes really that simple? In confusion, Brand suddenly thought of a certain truth from his past life. Based on the current situation, Brand felt that he had discovered the truth hidden behind the fog. Just like the top-notch ingredients often only require the simplest cooking methods, rune drawing only requires the most ordinary drawing methods. At least in terms of this semester's exams. Runic matrix should be a very simple elective subject. Brand's mood was a bit cheerful at this moment. It's just drawing, can it still stump me, Mr. Brand? Because I don't have a dedicated rune pen and paper in my hand. Brand immediately ran to the alchemy shop within the academy and spent dozens of magic coins to purchase a complete set of rune drawing equipment. That is to say, there is now a lot of abundant funds, and Brand was not as wealthy as before. He has decided to make a surprise attack on the study of runic arrays in the days leading up to the exam. Then pass the final exam of this semester as an ordinary candidate. After returning to the dormitory with brand new rune drawing equipment, Brand's mood was somewhat impatient. Fill the rune pen with rune ink and flip the book to the page with the illustration of rune number 1. Brand moved his wrist confidently and prepared to try drawing rune 1. I don't know if it's an illusion, but after carefully observing the illustration of rune 1 in the book, Brand always felt that the rune 1 in the book was not very printed, but rather a bit like someone had drawn it by hand. However, this was not a very important matter, and Brand quickly forgot about it. Holding the rune in his hand, he straightened his seat and compared it to the appearance of rune number 1. Brand slowly started writing. At the moment when the tip of the rune pen touches the rune paper, the patterns on the rune pen become bright. As the tip of the pen slid against the strokes of the painting, Brand was surprised to find that his spiritual power was gradually being sucked away by the rune. First, it enters the rune ink, and finally, it is printed on the ink of the rune paper together with the handwriting. In a daze, Brand's stroke was slightly crooked. At the next moment, a slight repulsion from the ink on the rune paper bounced the rune pen in Brand's hand slightly, and the half-stroke of the already completed rune number 1 also scattered into scattered ink in the blink of an eye. Brand knows that this should be a drawing failure. However, did drawing runes originally consume mental energy? Without further attempts, Brand put the rune aside. He felt that he had missed the precautions for drawing runes. Picking up the Book of Runes again, Brand carefully flipped through it. The fact is also similar to what he thought. Brand found a simple explanation for drawing runes in the previous chapter on how to draw runes. Runes are the cornerstone of the rules of the continent of Farns, and drawing them in any way will inevitably consume a considerable amount of mental energy. Even the most basic rune drawing of runes 1 to 3 will consume 60% to 70% of the mental power of a junior mage apprentice. After finding the precautions for drawing runes in the book, Brand frowned slightly. If what is written in the book is correct, my contemporary students, in a state of full spiritual power, can only draw one rune by consuming all their spiritual power. This can be considered a successful situation, as any mistake in the process of drawing runes can lead to failure and waste of mental energy, just like Brand did earlier. It seems that we need to practice well first. Practice is the first challenge in drawing runes. In the Book of Runes, it is said, no matter how runes are drawn, it will inevitably consume a considerable amount of spiritual energy. Therefore, every practice is a test of the mage's spiritual power. If medication is not used, the recovery after mental exhaustion will take several hours. Although I have more mental strength than my classmates at the same time, I definitely can't withstand the cost of practicing drawing runes. After all, there are only 6 days left before the exam. If I don't use the awakening potion, I can draw more than 10 times at most. The harsh facts made Brand very distressed, but soon his eyebrows relaxed again. As a great sage said before crossing the world, practice leads to true knowledge. Brand, who comes from the materialistic world, actually does not quite believe in the idealistic statement in books that drawing runes in any way will consume spiritual energy. I just casually drew a stroke. How did you know I was drawing runes? I, Brand, must give it a try today. Taking white paper and charcoal from the nearby bookshelf, Brand began to draw a stroke of the rune in his mind. When Brand dropped the charcoal on the white paper and gently exerted force on his wrist to slide the charcoal according to the stroke, he clearly felt a large loss of his mental strength. In the next moment, the charcoal pen also snapped into several sections with a click. The rapid loss of mental energy made Brand feel dizzy for a while. However, he quickly replied. The fact proves that what is said in the book is correct. For a moment, Brand's face was serious. He still underestimated the extraordinary power of the idealistic world. It has to be said that the power of the laws of the extraordinary world exceeds Brand's imagination. Silently, throw the remains of the charcoal and white paper into the trash can. Brand picked up the textbook of rune literature again and began to study it carefully. Although I really want to take shortcuts, some things seem to have no shortcuts to take. Brand feels that his mentality has been going wrong these past few days, always thinking about taking shortcuts. But there are not so many shortcuts in the world to take. People still need to be down to earth. After thinking about it, Brand felt that his spirit had been somewhat elevated. This should be what is called the feeling of having a clear mind. Taking a deep breath, Brand still put down the rune book in his hand that made his brain grow bigger. Then, he completely immersed his consciousness in the simulated world. At this moment, Brand, who was simulating the world, was in a clearing in the woods, with a clear stream flowing slowly beside him. In the center of the open space, there was a long purple sandalwood table, and Brand was sitting there, holding a pen that was no different from the external rune pen, writing and drawing on white paper. A lot of waste paper has been scattered on the long table. These waste papers are twisted and covered with some strange patterns. It can be vaguely seen that it looks like runes 1 to 3. Brand is practicing drawing runes in a simulated world. While practicing drawing runes and simulating the world, Brand pouted disdainfully. Stay grounded. It doesn't exist. As a seasoned academic scumbag, only by relying on simulated worlds can one barely survive. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. The Glorious Transformation of Students. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 9. The Splendid Transformation of Students. Time flies by in a hurry. At this point, it was already evening. In his personal dormitory, Brand had a slightly pale face with a clear expression of excitement. There are 3 rune papers arranged in a row on the workbench in front of me. The completed runes numbered 1 to 3 are arranged in sequence, with their skillful strokes describing the hard work and sweat behind them. Of course, there are also several empty test tubes of awakening potions in the corner of the desktop. Brand's spiritual power is not enough to draw 3 runes in a day. When he successfully drew the first rune, Brand felt a sense of academic achievement that only academic elites could experience. That wonderful feeling made him unconsciously intoxicated. In order to make that feeling last longer, he drank the awakening potion with a sudden surge of heart. Then, with continuous practice in the simulated world, Brand completed the learning and drawing of 3 runes in just 1 day. Because runes 1 to 3 were successfully drawn by Brand. From this moment on, the final assessment can no longer cause any obstacles for Brand. Of course, that's not the most important thing. Most importantly, Brand completed his magnificent transformation as a scumbag. Everything is the result of his unremitting efforts. Effort will bring rewards. Brand deeply understands this. He felt that his spirit had once again sublimated, and he was a bit closer to the unattainable realm of the great mage. Goo, because I focused on runes, I didn't eat all day. At this moment, Brand's stomach began to howl out of place. Brand, who was in a happy mood, did not care about such small matters with his stomach. After tidying up the table in front of him, Brand walked towards the college cafeteria after a long absence. Nobles, eating is just socializing, so the banquet hall in the college cafeteria holds banquets every night. Although Brand, who has a handsome face, does not reject making friends with others. But because the food in this world is really hard to describe. So most of the dinners at the college before, Brand solved them in a simulated world. Undoubtedly, the simulated world is also the real world, so eating in the simulated world can also fill your stomach. Although the simulated world feast is even better, Brand is eager to share the joy of achieving academic success with others at this moment. Although he usually stays in the dormitory to create the world, Brand, who has long sleeves, is good at dancing, and has a few good friends. Brand is now going to share with them the joy that hard work can bring rewards. Upon arriving at the college cafeteria, Brand, dressed in exquisite black and served by aristocrats, walked leisurely towards the direction of the banquet hall. Although it has been a long time since I came here for dinner, Brand still remembers the layout of the school cafeteria very clearly. The banquet hall for their current class of students is the priest's hall. The lintel of the sacrificial hall is printed with a pattern resembling a hooded black cloak, which is said to represent a legendary artifact of the undead. The Cloak of Death. In fact, the Cloak of Death disappeared with the downfall of the undead empire hundreds of years ago, and as for why its appearance was printed on the lintel, Brand thinks it should be to show a certain style. After all, it is an artifact. Since Brand walked into the banquet hall, many people's eyes gathered. The aristocratic descendants who are good at socializing will not spare anyone with social value. Therefore, every person who enters the banquet hall receives their attention. If there is value, they look for opportunities to make friends with it. If there is no value or conflicts with it, they ignore or avoid it. Although Brand was not surprised by the glances he cast, after a while, these glances did not significantly decrease, which made him somewhat puzzled. You should know that besides the ones Brand knows, there are also many people he doesn't know, and many of them are men. This made him very puzzled. In the past, at banquets, apart from some familiar friends, most of the people who followed him were women. Although the private lives of some nobles are chaotic, they do not show up on the table. So is there something that I don't know happened? At this moment, Brand had already poured himself a small half-glass of sweet wine with a tall crystal glass, and naturally joined the aristocratic circle in the southern provinces of the empire. As soon as Brand arrived, a beautiful lady warmly welcomed her. "Brand! It's been a long time since I saw you. What have you been up to lately?" This is one of his friends, Avril Robert, a staunch ally of the Holland family and the second daughter of the Robert family. She has always been very fond of Brand, but unfortunately, Brand only considers her as a good friend. Seeing Avril walking towards him, Brand smiled and responded to Avril. "I've been busy dealing with the final assessment lately. If I don't pass the final assessment and get expelled, I don't know how Yeltsin will scold me when I go back." The Robert family has always been considering marrying Avril and Yeltsin to bring the two families closer together. Although both of them have their own preferences as parties involved, they have come into contact with the younger generations of both families over and over again as acquaintances. Now listening to Brand talk about Yeltsin, Ivy also smiled slightly and talked about interesting stories about Yeltsin. Speaking of which, Yeltsin was recently rejected by Ms. Romaine in public again. When he takes a break from school and returns home, we should take this opportunity to mock him. "Oh. Tell me more." While Brand and Ivy were chatting happily, many people at the banquet began to discuss things about Brand. "Have you heard? This morning, Professor Morian had a great conversation with Brand in the alchemy laboratory. It is said that he has an extremely strong talent for alchemy, and Professor Morian is considering accepting Brand as a student." "Brand? That handsome little guy from the southern province? Is it really fake? This is only the first semester, and Professor Morian has started admitting students now. This world is too unfair. Do we still have to give him a powerful alchemy talent now that we have already given him such a handsome appearance? Anyway, I have decided to make friends with Brand. Maybe there will be times when I need Brand's help in the future. Hee hee. Look around, Brand, where else is your position?" Time did not pass long, but by this time Brand had already gathered many people around, all dressed beautifully as ladies. While having a pleasant conversation with the ladies beside him, Brand vaguely felt as if someone was calling his name. However, the sound in the banquet hall was a bit mixed, and he was sure he had heard it correctly. Thinking of his gaze upon entering the door, Brand couldn't help but ask the several beautiful ladies beside him. "Has anything special happened recently? I feel like the gaze towards me is a bit more than usual." End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Rumors of Catching the Wind and Shadow. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Rumors of Catching the Wind and Shadow. Brand's question made several ladies look at each other with a smile. Someone joked, "Handsome Brand, isn't it normal for you to receive attention? Where is it? I feel like the gaze at the ladies is more towards me. No matter how handsome I am, I can't match your beauty, can I?" Brand's compliments greatly benefited several ladies. The topic has finally become more serious. Speaking of which, starting this afternoon, there have been many people spreading rumors that Professor Morian had a great conversation with you in the alchemy laboratory and intended to enroll you as a student. Do you plan to develop in the field of alchemy and pharmacy in the future? So it's like this. Upon hearing her say this, Brand finally understood what was going on. When I went to see Professor Morian today, Brand didn't shy away from others, so many people saw it. The so-called happy conversation with Professor Morian should mean that when Brand left, Professor Morian escorted Brand to the door. This means that Professor Morian attaches great importance to Brand. In this era, the speed of information flow is not as fast as on Earth, so it is easy for three people to become tigers, and the more they spread, the more outrageous it becomes. The rumor that Professor Morian wanted to accept Brand as a student spread like this. After knowing the reason, Brand also smiled slightly and lowered his voice to explain to them. Don't listen to those unfounded rumors. I know nothing about alchemy and pharmacy. Professor Morian won't accept me as a foolish student. I went to find Professor Morian about family matters. Is the Holland family going to enter the potion market? Upon hearing Brand mention his family collaboration with Professor Morian, the lady's eyes instantly brightened up. As descendants of the nobility, they immediately smelled the fragrance of benefits. The Holland family has always regarded planting as the main industry in their territory. Although it has not been involved in the cultivation of potions before, the basic conditions for potion cultivation are all met by the Holland family, only one opportunity to start. Now Brand represents the family and the alchemist to discuss cooperation. It is easy to associate the Holland family with entering the field of potion cultivation. For the curious gazes of the ladies, Brand just smiled slightly and didn't talk much. My own father doesn't even know yet, how can these little girls know the details first? Brand is not someone who is easily tempted by beauty. Cough. Brand began to shift the topic. Speaking of the elective course for the final assessment, which one do you plan to focus on? I plan to focus on rune grammar matrix. The scope of this elective course is relatively narrow, and I feel that passing it is not a problem. A woman's expression was shocked and she said, rune formation learning. Can you already draw runes? It looks like this is a lady who knows the exam questions. Brand nodded solemnly in his eyes, as if recalling the sweat he had worked hard to leave behind. Although the process was indeed arduous, I am now able to successfully draw runes from numbers 1 to 3. Although Brand wanted to continue sharing his touching inspirational experience for a while, he found that the atmosphere in front of him was a bit off. The ladies in front of him all looked like immortals. Although Brand enjoyed the gaze, he felt that their reactions were a bit exaggerated. Looking back on his experience of drawing runes again, Brand is very certain. This is something that can be achieved without using his brain, just by burying his head and working hard. So Brand humbly said, don't be too surprised, I'm very certain that this can be achieved through hard work. I believe as long as you put in enough sweat, you can also do it. As Brand was lost in the admiration of the ladies, an untimely and indifferent male voice came over. This is not something that can be achieved through hard work, Brand. There must be a limit to playing jokes. Brand smiled politely and looked over. After seeing the person's appearance, Brand recalled the relevant information. If Brand remembers correctly, the man who spoke should be Andy Cloud, the eldest son of the Cloud family of the Earls of the Northern Provinces. As for why he showed hostility towards Brand, it's easy to understand. Because his beloved girl was gathered around Brand, looking at him with an adorable expression. Generally speaking, this is an intolerable thing. Although Andy has a bad face, Brand is not very worried whether this guy will come up and punch him. Nobility is all about face, and few nobles fight against people in public due to their jealousy. Even a very small number of people like Andy express their dissatisfaction in public, which is really a loss of noble demeanor. Of course, it is highly possible to make a secret move, so in order to avoid being covered in a burlap bag. Brand generally does not leave the Wizarding Academy, and even if he wants to leave, he is well prepared. After all, he has become accustomed to it. From childhood to adulthood, there have always been people jealous of his handsome face. Therefore, Brand encountered many bold bandits secretly. Brand shrugged helplessly towards Andy's hostility. He's not going to pick up Andy. Because even if he had to pick it up, he didn't know how to do it, because fundamentally, Brand was a scumbag. At least at this point, Brand doesn't want to discuss academic issues with anyone. There are many people who have hostility towards Brand, and Andy, who has more lice, doesn't itch. But considering that Lord Holland has always taught Brand to have the aristocratic demeanor, he generally holds a tolerant attitude towards those who envy his appearance. After all, fundamentally speaking, people's jealousy stems from Brand's handsomeness. Therefore, Brand himself is the source of all evil. Facing Andy with a cold expression on his face, Brand smiled leniently, raised his cup, and then signaled friendly to Andy. The sweet wine tonight tastes pretty good. I think it must have been carefully prepared by the kitchen staff. Would you like to try it? Bran's goodwill left Andy slightly stunned. According to Andy's script, under his own provocation, Brand should be able to mock and ridicule him. Then he will, under the gaze of a group of girls, especially a unique girl, quote from the classics and silence Brand, a clown who only knows how to boast, and then he will stand out. But why did Brand shift the topic to sweet wine? Perhaps it's because today's sweet wine really tastes good. Andy didn't figure out how to answer the call for a moment. However, Brand didn't wait for Andy to say anything more. Under the jealous gaze of a group of aristocratic youths, he led a group of girls towards the dining table. After drinking such a long drink, Brand now wants to eat something. As for Andy, the girls around Brand won't leave him any chance to touch him. End of this chapter.